They found it days later, a child's shoe, half burned, half melted, the small strap still buckled, the heel fused to stone. It was red once. Now it was the color of ash. No one knew her name. No one ever came to claim it. It was the only thing left of a family that vanished when the sky turned white. August 6th, 1945. At exactly 8:15 a.m. a single American bomber passed over the quiet city of Hiroshima. Below, people were beginning their day, mothers hanging laundry, children walking to school, workers cycling to the post office. The air was heavy with the hum of summer insects, the endless chirping of cicadas. And then, without warning, everything stopped. The light arrived before the sound. A blinding flash brighter than the sun, followed by wind hot enough to peel the world apart. In less than 1 second, a city of 350,000 people was erased. Stone turned to dust, flesh to shadow, families, homes, laughter gone. In their place, only silence. When rescue workers entered the ruins 3 days later, they didn't find bodies. They found objects. A lunchbox, a broken watch stopped at 8:15, a doll missing one arm, and a child's shoe, its leather warped, its story untold. This is not just the story of Hiroshima. It's the story of the family that once filled that shoe of the morning they lived, the moment they vanished, and the small, ordinary thing that outlived them all. Because sometimes history is not written in words, it's written in what remains. Before the light came, Hiroshima was just another city getting ready for breakfast. The war had dragged on for years, but life still went on quietly, stubbornly. Vendors opened their stalls along the Ota River. Children in straw hats walked in pairs towards school, clutching satchels and lunchboxes wrapped in cloth. The sky was clear, the kind of blue that made people believe, just for a moment, that peace might be near. In a blue, small wooden house near the Honkawa River, a mother brushed her daughter's hair. Her name was Emiko, 7 years old. She was small, with bright eyes and a habit of humming while she tied her sandals. Her father, a postal clerk, had left early for work. Her mother handed her a small rice ball wrapped in paper and said, "Be home before the rain." It was a normal morning, one that should have been forgettable. But history would remember every detail. As Emiko walked to school, she passed soldiers on bicycles, women carrying buckets of water, and groups of students assigned to demolition work, clearing wooden houses to prevent fire spread from future air raids. The city believed it was safe. Unlike Tokyo or Osaka, Hiroshima had been spared from major bombing. Some said it was protected by fate. Others whispered that the Americans were saving it for something special. No one understood what that meant. At 8 a.m., the teacher called attendance at Honkawa Elementary. 30 children raised their hands. They recited the emperor's rescript on education, voices soft but proud. When they finished, the teacher smiled and began writing on the chalkboard. Outside, cicadas sang in the heat. A woman bent to wash clothes in the river. A baby laughed from a window. A train whistle echoed across the bridge. Then, at 8:15, the world went white. A flash brighter than the sun swallowed the city in an instant. It was so bright that those who survived said they couldn't tell if their eyes were open or closed. The sound came after a wave that tore the sky apart. Windows shattered miles away. The air turned into fire. Where Emiko's classroom stood, there was now only wind and flame. The walls folded inward. The children vanished before they could scream. Miles away, her mother felt the shockwave and fell to the floor. When she ran toward the school, there was no school left, just a crater of burning wood and twisted steel. She called her daughter's name until her voice broke. No one answered. Days later, rescue workers would find something small near the rubble of Honkawa Elementary, a child's shoe, blackened and curled, the buckle still intact. The mother never found her daughter, only the shoe. She held it in her lap for hours, whispering, "I told you to be home before the rain." They said the light was so bright it erased color itself. At exactly 8:15 a.m., the bomb known as Little Boy detonated 600 meters above the heart of Hiroshima. For a fraction of a second, the temperature at ground zero reached nearly 4,000 degrees Celsius hotter than the surface of the Sunday. The air itself ignited, stone buildings melted, wood burst into flame. And everything, human, bone, skin, voice, memory, disappeared. Survivors said the sky turned white, then orange, then black. Those standing outside left nothing behind but shadows burned into the pavement, the outlines of bodies that no longer existed. The blast wave flattened nearly 70% of the city. Bridges collapsed, streetcars vanished, the Ota River filled with fire. At Honkawa Elementary, where Emiko and her classmates had been sitting moments earlier, not one student survived. The entire schoolchildren, teachers, books gone. Only a few scattered objects remained: a lunchbox, a scorched notebook, a small red shoe. One of the first rescue workers, Private Kenji Yamada, described what he saw. There were no people, only colorless shapes. I saw a child's shoe still warm to the touch, and I couldn't tell if it was real or memory. Those who were far enough to survive the blast, but close enough to see it, spoke of silence. A silence more terrifying than the explosion. No birds, no wind, no sound except the crackle of fires devouring what was left. Then came the screams. People staggered out of the ruins, skin hanging from their arms, faces unrecognizable. They begged for water, for mercy, for anyone to tell them what had happened. Mothers carried bundles they thought were children, only to realize halfway they were holding ashes. The rivers overflowed with bodies, their clothes still soldering. The bomb had killed 80,000 people instantly. By the end of the year, the total would rise to over 140,000. But for Emiko's family, numbers didn't matter. They didn't even know what to call what had happened. The mother searched the ruins of Honkawa for days, her hands burned, her eyes nearly blind from dust and smoke. She found nothing, no body, no trace of her child's voice. On the third day, she noticed something red poking through the ashes near a collapsed wall. She brushed it away gently, and there it was. Her daughter's shoe. The leather had fused to metal, but the shape was still there. She held it close, whispering her child's name again. A rescue worker told her softly, "Ma'am, you should bury it." She shook her head. "I can't. She might still need it." And so, she carried it home, a single shoe in her trembling hands, the last piece of her daughter, the last proof she had lived. The fires burned for 3 days. But it was the silence afterward that broke the survivors. Every street, every alley, every home had become a grey sea of ash. The smell of smoke and metal clung to everything. When the wind blew, it carried dust made of the dead. Rescue teams moved through what had once been a city, now only outlines scorched bridges, melted bicycles, glass fused to the ground. They didn't know where to start. The landmarks were gone. The river had changed its path. The maps no longer matched the earth. A young soldier, Private Yamada, joined one of the first search units. He carried no shovel, no mask, just his bare hands. Every few meters, someone would call out, "Here!" But there was rarely anything to find. He wrote later in a letter, "The air tasted like metal. We could hear our boots sinking into ash. The sound was soft, like stepping on snow. Only it wasn't snow." Among the ruins, he found fragments of lives, a charred lunchbox filled with blackened rice, a glass bottle melted into the shape of a tear, a pocket watch stopped forever at 8:15. Each one told a story he couldn't bear to finish. Then, near what had been Honkawa Elementary, he found something small and red, a child's shoe. The strap was still buckled. The heel fused to a piece of stone. It was light in his hand, almost fragile, as if it might crumble with a breath. He placed it carefully in his satchel. It was the only thing he had found that looked human. Days later, he met the mother who had lost her daughter. She was sitting by a riverbank, holding a bundle of cloth. Inside, another shoe, the mate to the one he carried. She looked up at him, her voice barely a whisper. "That was my Emiko's. She always lost the left one first." He offered to help her bury them together, but she refused. "Not yet," she said. "She might still come home." For weeks, the mother waited. Every morning she walked to the ruins, calling her daughter's name. Every evening she returned with the same silence. The soldier left Hiroshima soon after. But he carried that shoe with him wherever he went, not as a souvenir, but as a burden. He wrote in his journal, "The city no longer speaks, but that small shoe won't stop whispering." By autumn, the smell of death still lingered. The rivers had cleared, the grass began to grow again, but under every stone, under every step, were traces of those who had once lived there. And somewhere in the ruins of a school that no longer existed, the memory of a girl and her red shoes lingered, a fragment of innocence left in a world that had forgotten how to be kind. History remembers numbers. The shoe remembered names. The Tanaka family had lived in a small wooden home near the river, a father, a mother, and their 7-year-old daughter, Emiko. They weren't soldiers or leaders, just ordinary people doing ordinary things while the empire crumbled around them. Her father worked at the post office, sorting letters that would never be delivered. Her mother taught calligraphy to neighborhood children. At night, they listened to distant air raid sirens and prayed that the war would end before it reached them. On August 5th, the evening before the bombing, Emiko had begged her mother for new shoes. The ones she had were too small, the leather cracking at the heel. Her mother promised to fix them. That night, by candlelight, she stitched the strap and polished them until they shone a bright red, the same color as the summer sunset. When Emiko saw them, she giggled and said, "Now I can run faster than the wind." Those were the shoes she wore the next morning, the ones she never took off. After the blast, her father never came home. He had been only a few hundred meters from the hypocenter. There was nothing left to bury. Her mother searched for days until her voice gave out. She walked the ruins barefoot because her sandals had burned away. When someone handed her water, she poured it on the ashes of the school. She said it was for her daughter in case she was still thirsty. Weeks later, she gathered what she could, a warped cooking pot, a half-burned photo, and the little shoe. She placed them in a wooden box and took them to the riverbank. There, she sat for hours, staring at the water that had carried so many away. She whispered the names of her husband and child over and over until the words lost their sound. A nearby priest, one of the few who had survived, approached her. He asked if she wanted to hold a ceremony. She shook her head. "They're already everywhere," she said. "The air, the water, the light. I only keep this because my hands don't know how to let go." She wrapped the shoe in white cloth and carried it with her when she moved to live with relatives outside the city. For years, she kept it on a small shelf near the window, next to incense sticks and photographs of mountains she would never see again. Every August 6th, she lit a candle beside it. The wax melted slowly, running down the wood like tears. No one ever rebuilt the Tanaka home. A new bridge stands there now, and tourists cross it every day without knowing that a family once lived and vanished beneath their feet. But the shoe remained. It outlived them all, holding the shape of a foot that would never grow, and the memory of a mother who refused to forget. He couldn't bury them, so he carried what was left. Private Kenji Yamada never forgot that mother's eyes red from smoke, empty from loss. He left Hiroshima weeks later with the second shoe in his pack, wrapped in a piece of cloth. He didn't know why he kept it. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was because it was the only thing in that whole city that still looked like it belonged to a child. When the war ended, Kenji returned to his hometown in Kyushu. His village was still standing, but nothing felt alive. He was 21, already older than his years. His mother asked what he'd seen. He said nothing. How could he tell her that he'd held the end of the world in his hands? Each night he had the same dream, the sky turning white, the sound of cicadas, the child's shoe resting on a bed of ash. He would wake up sweating, his fingers clutching the small box beside his futon. Inside lay the shoe. He never cleaned it. He never told anyone where it came from. It was his burden and his proof that the horror had been real, that there had once been a girl named Emiko who laughed and ran and believed in tomorrow. In the 1,950 seconds, Japan began to rebuild. Factories opened, neon signs appeared, the cities filled with color again. But Kenji couldn't stand fireworks, couldn't look at bright light. Every flash reminded him of that morning. He married, had children, and worked quietly at a train station. To them, he was just a quiet man who loved routine. But in his closet, behind his uniforms, sat a small wooden box. Once a year, on August 6th, he would take it out and whisper a prayer for the girl he never knew. He kept a diary no one read. In it, he wrote, "Her shoe is lighter now. The ashes fall away each year. That means her spirit is free. But I am not." In 1970, when his health began to fail, Kenji decided to return to Hiroshima. The city was unrecognizable, clean, modern, rebuilt. But when he walked along the river, he said it still smelled faintly of smoke when the wind changed. He visited the Peace Memorial Park, where families laid flowers under the cenotaph that read, "Rest in peace, for the error shall not be repeated." Kenji placed the box at the base of the monument. When he opened it, the shoe was smaller than he remembered, brittle, darkened, fragile. He set it down gently and whispered, "It belongs here. She belongs here." Then he bowed deeply, tears falling onto the stone. He didn't speak again for a long time. Years later, museum archivists found a note tucked under the box. "To the child I could not save, you've walked with me long enough. May you rest where the light began." The shoe became part of the Hiroshima Peace Memorial Collection, one of thousands of artifacts that spoke for those who no longer could. Visitors who saw it didn't know Kenji's name, or Emiko's, or her mother's, but they always paused, as if the small, burnt shoe demanded silence, and gave it. Every object in Hiroshima has a heartbeat if you stand still long enough. You can almost hear it. In 1955, the Hiroshima Peace Memorial Museum opened its doors. Inside, there were no heroes, no generals, no grand speeches, only objects. A twisted tricycle, a school lunchbox filled with blackened rice, a white dress burned halfway through. And, near the center of the display, a single child's shoe red turned to charcoal, its strap buckled as if still waiting to be worn. Visitors would stop and stare. Some would bow. Some would cry. Others could only whisper one word, "Kodomo," child. The shoe was small enough to fit in one hand. Next to it, a placard read, "Found near Honkawa Elementary School. Belonged to a girl, approximately 7 years old. No one knew her name, no one needed to. That was the point." Survivors who visited said the museum was like walking through a second Hiroshima, not of buildings, but of memory. The air felt heavy, as if the past still lingered between the glass cases. Children would press their hands against the glass, seeing reflections of themselves beside artifacts of those who never grew up. Teachers would lower their voices when they reached the shoe, explaining gently that sometimes war doesn't just take lives, it takes futures. One elderly woman, her hair silver and tied neatly in a bun, was seen standing before the display for hours. She brought a single flower, placed it beneath the glass, and whispered, Emiko. No one asked who she was. Some say she was the mother. Others say she was just someone who remembered. The museum staff noticed that the area around the shoe was always spotless. Visitors would polish the glass with their sleeves, remove fallen petals, straighten the offering table. Even strangers cared for it, as if it were their own child's. The curators called it the silent exhibit, because no one spoke there, and yet it spoke to everyone. American visitors who came in later decades often left changed. Many wrote in the guest book, "We did not know." Some wrote, "Forgive us." And one note, written by a veteran, said simply, "I thought I was fighting monsters. I was wrong." In that room, nationalities disappeared. There was no enemy, no victor, only the echo of a small life lost to a sky too bright to look at. Over time, school children began visiting each year, bringing paper cranes folded from bright origami paper. They would bow, place them near the display, and whisper, "May you never be forgotten." The shoe had become more than an artifact. It was a heartbeat, faint, eternal, refusing to fade. And through it, Hiroshima found a way to speak not of war, but of mercy. Hiroshima lost more than a city that morning. It lost its children. Of the 6,000 students present in schools across Hiroshima on August 6th, most never came home. They weren't soldiers, they weren't enemies, just children carrying books, pencils, and dreams of growing up. The war had turned even them into targets. For decades afterward, the survivors, known as hibakusha, struggled with that memory. Some had been just far enough away to live, yet close enough to see their friends vanish in the light. One woman, Sasaki Keiko, who was 8 at the time, wrote in her diary, "I called my friend Yuki's name. Her seat was empty. Only her shoes were still there, smoking. She survived, but radiation sickness left her hair falling out in clumps. For years, she couldn't eat rice. The smell reminded her of burned skin. When she grew old, she became a teacher. Each year, she told her students about Yuki and the shoes that stayed behind. And she wasn't alone. Across Japan, stories like hers multiplied a generation of ghosts that lived in the memories of the ones who survived. At Honkawa Elementary, a memorial was built where the school once stood. On it are inscribed the names of the students and teachers who perished that morning. Beside it, under glass, sits a display case containing a few recovered objects, a notebook, a hairpin, a toy soldier, and the small red shoe. Visitors say the air there feels still, even on windy days. You can hear the river nearby, flowing past the stones that once held so much pain. Each year, on August 6th, the school children of modern Hiroshima gather there. They wear bright uniforms, carry paper lanterns, and sing softly as they walk to the Peace Memorial Park. Some hold candles, others hold folded cranes. All walk in silence. An elderly man, Kenji Yamada's age, if he were alive, watches from the side. He bows his head as they pass. His hands tremble slightly, but his eyes are calm. He whispers, "You came home, little one. You came home." When night falls, thousands of lanterns are released onto the Motoyasu River. They drift slowly, each carrying a small flame, one for every soul lost that day. The water glows red and gold, like the reflection of a sky that once burned. And among them, one lantern carries a name handwritten by a child, for Emiko, age 7. No one knows who wrote it. It was a student, or a teacher, or someone who once saw her photograph in the museum. But as it floats away into the night, it feels as though the city itself is finally saying goodbye. It's just a child's shoe, small, blackened, and silent. But it holds the weight of everything Japan promised never to forget. Decades have passed since that morning in 1945. The rivers are clean again. Hiroshima's skyline glows with neon lights. Children play where the ruins once stood. And yet, Inside the Peace Memorial Museum, beneath quiet glass, that tiny shoe still rests a witness that never stops speaking. Every year, survivors visit and whisper prayers. Younger generations bow their heads even if they were born long after the war. Because the story of Hiroshima is not just about destruction, it's about what remains when everything else is gone. A young volunteer at the museum once said, "Every time I dust the glass, I feel like I'm touching someone's memory." And she is. Because that shoe still carries the warmth of a small foot, a mother's tears, and a soldier's guilt, the fragments of a world too innocent for war. It outlived the empire that sent bombers into the sky. It outlived the ideologies that turned children into casualties. It even outlived the people who once searched for it. And yet, it continues to tell their story quietly, truthfully. When visitors leave the museum, many stop at the river outside. They drop paper cranes into the water, watching them float toward the sea. If you stand there long enough, you can almost hear the city breathing again, not with fear, but with memory. The US called it victory. Japan called it tragedy. But history, if you listen closely, calls it something simpler: loss. A child's shoe in the ashes became a reminder of what humanity is capable of and what it must never become again. It belonged to no one and to everyone. To a little girl named Emiko, to a mother who couldn't let go, to a soldier who carried her memory through his life, and to every person who has ever looked at that shoe and understood even for a moment what peace truly means. Because peace isn't just the absence of war, it's the act of remembering what war takes away. So when you see that small shoe in the museum, don't look away. Let it speak, let it remind you. Because as long as that shoe exists, as long as someone stands before it in silence, the family it belonged to will never truly be gone.